everyone. This series has really grabbed my attention. I absolutely recommend it for everybody at all interested in fantasy. And it's from an author who I have read in the past, and I didn't like what he wrote. So the first book of Songs of Chaos is Ascendant by Michael R. Miller, and it's a book that I almost walked away from in the beginning of the book because I started reading it as part of research, actually. I'm writing a fantasy series where music and magic are deeply intertwined, where song is actually a form of magic. So I was looking around and I said, okay, internet, what's a fantasy series that uses music as magic? And it recommended Songs of Chaos, and that's what I found in my research is one of the few, actually, that you don't see that a lot. So I said, okay, I'll give it a try. But in the beginning, the first quarter really of this book is very YA feeling. It wasn't really what I was expecting, because I was expecting epic Dragon Rider fantasy with music as magic, and I'm getting YA. But it really it has a tonal shift somewhere after about the first quarter of the book, where it really gets interesting. The world gets larger, the stakes become more intense. By the end of it, I'm like, okay, where's the second book? I'm ready to go. So let's talk about how this won me over, and then we'll go from there. This is by Michael R. Miller. He is a Scottish author. He's an independent author. Again, this is another self-published book. Very high quality in terms of writing and cover art. You can see here, he does everything like it's traditionally published, which is what I think independent authors need to do as much as they can, is not look like just another self-published book. You need to really make it look like a traditionally published book for it to stand out. And this did a great job of that. I had to look up whether or not it was self-published. It wasn't immediately obvious. And the grammar and the audiobook production, everything was great. It's a Dragon Rider fantasy, and it's also very much a traditional epic fantasy. So it's not as traditional as, say, Thin Blade. It's more along the lines of an Aragon or a Pern series. The character of Holt Cook is our main character. He is very lowborn. In the beginning, he's a servant. He is apprenticed to his father, who is a cook. He has to work his way up from there in a system very much designed to keep him right where he is. Then he ends up with his dragon companion, Ash. Ash is awesome. And their bond, and bond is an actual phrase in the book, but in this sense, I mean just the bond between the two of them is amazing. These two characters could not be a better match and get along, not just get along, just every interaction with them is awesome. Every step of the way, it's just immediately like, okay, yes, I want to spend more time with these two characters. Deeply engaging, deeply interesting relationship where you have two extremely kind people in this world where that's not the norm. So early in the book, though, Holt feels very much like your traditional YA coming of age character. He's dreaming of being a dragon rider, which he'll never actually be, and he's stuck in this life that he doesn't really want, and he's very low in society, and he's right at that age. He's 16-ish. I think he's 15 when the book starts, and then he becomes 16 partway through. And again, I was very much like, eh. And I think the writing actually really improves as the book goes on too, because also in the beginning, the prose is kind of rough, not bad, just somewhat blunt. And I think that was the author trying to, because he talks about how in this book he tried to make it YA, and then he ends up totally going away from that because he realized, or he felt like he was constrained by the conventions of that genre, which is understandable. And the early chapters are very familiar. If you've seen any YA at all, in the beginning of this book, you're going to go, oh yeah, no, I see where this is going. This is YA. That isn't bad, but if you're in it for epic fantasy, you're going to sit there going, what is going on? And don't put it down. Because it does change. Once Ash is hatched, stuff starts to change, and then about almost the halfway point, everything really starts, the changes really start to accelerate. And by the end of it, you're not like, oh, this is YA. You're like, yep, this is fantasy. Grab me the next book and let's go. I think it was a very wise choice by Michael R. Miller to not stay in that YA category. I don't think this story was working as YA. But, again, it changes. It doesn't stay there. You're not even stuck there for a whole book. So just keep reading. As you go on, the world expands, and pretty significantly. And that's, you start a small and then you kind of spread out. That's normal in fantasy. But the world that expands into is really interesting. The politics become more interesting. You learn about the history of dragons. Some of it, you actually learn more as you go along through the whole series. And then, of course, your larger conflict occurs where Holt finds himself in this situation where, so the Dragon Riders were created to fight the Scourge, which is this kind of undead / magical bug swarm. They've been doing it for centuries and centuries, and I don't want to get too spoilery here, but there's a betrayal that happens, and it upends everything, and then you find out as you go through the book that there's way more going on now that is threatening the whole world than just a typical. It had become sort of routine. There's a Scourge uprising. Everybody runs to the fortified cities. The Dragon Riders show up. They fight the Scourge. They break the Scourge. Everything goes back to normal. Several years later, there's another one. So they were in this cycle, and then all of a sudden, everything's different. And it starts to break this whole system down, even in the first book, and more as you go on. The magic, you learn a lot more about the magic. The magic is very intricately woven into the story. There's not a whole lot of situations where they're just sitting there talking about the magic. That does happen, and that's fine, but there's also a lot of learn as they go going on, where Holt and Ash have to figure this out. They're not traditional Dragon Riders. They're not, Ash isn't wanted by his own kind because he's blind, and Holt isn't wanted in his new position because he's supposed to be a cook, not some important person. Right? And the society is built where everybody has your last name tells you what you do. His last name is Cook because he's a cook. So in this strict society where everybody's roles are determined, you have this guy breaking those roles, and it very much doesn't like that. And that's a theme throughout the whole series of these different characters that don't fit neatly into the square pegs they're supposed to fit into, and how society revolts against that and how they have to deal with that. The pacing really picks up once Ash is born, once Ash is hatched. Before then, it's pretty slow, but it picks up significantly as you go along, and he gets a mentor. All the side characters are awesome in this. All of them are interesting. All of them have their own personalities and quirks. So he meets Talia, who is a dragon rider in the order. She's a low level. She's what you call an Ascendant. That's the title. She has a purple fire dragon who is very arrogant and haughty, and she can be a little bit arrogant and haughty because she was noble born, and their relationship developed extremely naturally. And you think, these two are going to be love interests. They're not, at least not in the first book. And I appreciate that he took that route, where it's not just, so much fantasy is like, oh, yep, there's a love interest. Now they're going to be in love. That's just not how this works at all. And I think it's great. And the magic system is really well thought out. It's kind of a what do they call it? A progression fantasy, in that sense of you have to progress through the magic at different stages, and it grants you different abilities, and it's all very much defined and laid out. So you have Ascendant, and then you have a champion, and then you have high champion, then you have exalted champion, and then you have lord, and then you have High Lord, and then you have Exalted Lord, and then you have Paragon. And at each different step, it's yep, you get these specific abilities, and this does this, and it's very laid out progression fantasy style. Just kind of an interesting mix of this traditional Dragon Rider fantasy and something similar to progression fantasy. And I was wondering as I was going through this book, okay, is this going to be one of those books where everybody's fine, right? No. Characters that you meet more than once die, and it's permanent. And I like that because it's there's immediate, you're the stakes. Once that character dies, and I'm not going to say who it is, but once one of the side characters dies, you're immediately we've gone to different territory now. We're not in YA. So the deeper you go into this book, the more interesting everything becomes. The more you learn about the characters, the more the magic system is talked about and introduced, the more the dragons are developed, the more society around them is developed. You start in a small little dragon hold, you end up in a big city, and the whole series is kind of built that way, where you learn more and more and more about the world as it goes on, instead of trying to dump it all on top of you in the beginning, like a lot of fantasy unfortunately does. So Holt Cook grows really well through the series. So does the book. So does Ash. And their bond, literal bond and figurative bond, develops awesomely. His relationship with Talia develops very naturally, where they don't get along at first, and it develops from there. And the two dragons also have clashing personalities where they don't get along, and their relationship also develops in tandem with the writers, which I think is great. Ash is really the emotional backbone of the story, and he is there for Holt, and Holt is there for him in a deep connective way, and they're really the heart of this story. I mean, it's got a good plot, it's got good side characters, it's got a good world, it's got a good magic system, it's got good pacing, it's got increasing stakes as you go. These two are the heart of the book by a large margin. So there's a lot of mysteries that are kind of introduced and touched on in the first book, and expand more as you go. But the first book really does a great job of really focusing on the important part of the story for that book, which is the situation they're in and the danger of this new kind of uprising, now supported for some reason. They don't know why. It is revealed why, of course. They don't know why this betrayal has happened that has killed a whole bunch of the dragon riders and wiped out the entire hold. They don't know why the Scourge are acting different. And you uncover these answers, and then you end up with more answers at the end, which is exactly what leads you into the second book, like, immediately. Really like the way the dragons are written overall. Every individual dragon has character. In the first book, you really get Ash and Pyra mostly. Pyra being Talia's dragon. There are a couple of other dragons that you meet kind of but sidelong, but those are the two. And then as the series progresses, you get more, and there's so much character to each dragon. It's not a dragon fantasy where the dragons are like complicated horses. These are strong, deeply complex characters all on their own, which is a huge part of why this first book works so well, is that Ash himself is so interesting and so complex and so emotionally deep, and his relationship with Holt is so important, and it's so well thought out. So if you like dragon fantasy, if you like epic fantasy, if you like character-focused fantasy, and expanding and detailed worlds with lots of really interesting lore and stuff that is revealed over time and not just dumped on your head, and you like a long fantasy series, so this is 4 books. He's writing the 5th book now, and I believe it's going to be a 6-book series, but don't hold me to that. Pick up Ascendant. Give it the time it needs to develop, because you will absolutely fall in love with this book. And you'll fall in love with the series. And I say that as a person who read the first trilogy this guy wrote and couldn't get through it all. This is a huge improvement over his previous books by leaps and bounds. If you haven't heard of Michael R. Miller, and you're a fantasy fan, you need to go out and pick up Ascendant and read it. We need more independent authors who are developing like this. And all of this just improves as the series goes along too. There are some really amazing characters that come out, but Holt and Ash always remain the emotional core of this entire series, and they're an amazing set of characters. I try not to give anything a 10 out of 10. You know, for me, that's a very high bar to get to. I'm going to put this at a 9 out of 10. Maybe an 8 if you want to go with, think about how slow it starts out, but the rest of it is so good. It is entirely worth your time. If you like this video, please hit the like button, consider subscribing to the channel, the bell for notifications, and I will see you next time.